Hello, it's Cate Stillman, and welcome back to the Yoga Healer podcast. And on the episode today, we're talking about Dharma and your ambition, how to achieve the goals in your life. So often people set goals they don't achieve, or it takes much longer, maybe even years longer to achieve those goals, and they feel like they didn't do it right or they didn't do it on time. Sometimes we set goals that aren't really in alignment with ourselves, like what we really want or what our next purpose truly is. And sometimes we set goals because we really think we can do something like much greater than we're currently doing. So that's what this episode is about today, is Dharma and how to achieve the goals that you want to achieve in your life, how to clarify your ambitions and live your life on target. This is part of the series that's part of our book launch for Master of You, which you can find at masterofyou.us. That's masterofyou.us. And the reason I did a .s wasn't because I'm so pro USA. It's because us. This is really about you leading you, and then we all become leaders in the process. So as part of the series, I'm guiding you through the book. And I'm hoping that you'll either listen to the whole book on Audible or that you'll read it. And there's a free workbook that you can find on the masterofyou.us website. I highly recommend getting the workbook. It's free, whether you're doing it with the podcast or doing it with the book. Obviously, the book goes into much greater detail, and I'm just glancing over a few of the key teachings in each chapter. So I started with what is Dharma, because a lot of people aren't familiar with the word, but of course we're all familiar with the concept of having a purposeful life, having a life of deep meaning, and maybe even the concept like that you're here to do something. Yes, you in this lifetime. Yep, this one right here, right now. The episode I did after that, if you missed it, was the mindset of Dharma. That's where I get into the ethos, that there's specific ways to train your mind to think. Now, thinking is an amazingly underutilized resource in modern life. And unless we have a contemplative practice, it's hard to use the mind well. We're really going to dive into how to use the mind for critical issues in achieving goals today. That's the focus of fire element in this book, Master of You. The episode I did after that for this series was on organizing your home, aligned to your next self. So in identity evolution, there's always this next chapter of your life, who you're becoming next. In identity evolution, the yogis were super familiar with this concept that like, you're so free, Svatantriya, you're so free, you can create who you want to become next. And that's living a truly evolutionary life where you don't get stuck, you don't get static, but you do become more and more grounded to be able to expand into greater potentials. And then the last episode we did on the Dharma series was for caring for your body. So if you missed any of those, go back and listen. You'll love the entire series. And in that, you'll also get a lot of insight into just exactly where your focus should be. We do have a course. I have a course where I guide people through the process of Master of You. And the reason that helps is because it's really easy to delay. It's easy to procrastinate. It's easy to think that you're going to do something and then not actually do it, not actually get her done. And that's what we're going to talk about today is, where are you at in terms of your Dharma, your purpose in the next chapter of your life? So sometimes when we look at the entire life purpose, it seems overwhelming. Like, what's the purpose of overall arching purpose of your whole life? For a lot of us, we can't get into macro thinking like that. We can't often, with facility, just step far enough back that we can see the overture, the overviews. Now, in macro level thinking, as you want to be able to see, you do want to be able to see the entirety of your life. And you also want to be able to see the next chapter in front of you. Like, where are you going? And is it leading in the right direction? Often when I start working with people, I find that they're just sensing how it's not the right direction, but rather than like what is exactly the direction that they want to go next. And that's why in the process of Master of You, I found like it's really important to move through the other elements before getting into vision. It's important to actually build a bit of a container for the light that happens with fire element. So I'll read a little bit from the book now on this. As spaces and body rhythms align with purpose, ambition comes into focus, revealing Dharma. Dharma reveals itself through specific desires, an emerging version of what you want your life to be like next. In space element, we focused on home. In earth element, on body rhythms. And with fire, we now turn to the powers of your mind. Fire element in Mastery of You focuses on mental powers, the capacity to discern your vision and generate your best strategy into a plan of action. Fire, called Tejas in Ayurveda, is the most intense and transformative of the 5 elements. Fire requires the spark of desire, fuel for sustenance, and space to spread. You can point the spotlight of fire to analyze and decide your destination. Now, that word decide is really important because as you get more clear, and the reason we clear space first is you want your space to align and reinforce the vibration of who you're becoming next. It's really the fastest, easiest way. I've done this for so long with so many people, and time and again, I find they can't get clear with vision until their space is resonant on a vibrational level with who they're wanting to become next, how they're wanting to feel next. And it's a weird thing. I mean, it's actually like it's a very physical, tangible process. I love Michael Stone's realization, the late Michael Stone, an amazing yogi and meditation teacher. And he found that we actually need a deeper materialism. You need your materialistic life to be a direct reflection of who you want to become next, so that you actually get pulled into your future self rather than having your stuff pull you back. Okay, so that's a little bit about why you need to clear, like why ether comes before fire in this sequence. So with discernment, you're able to then see clearly. And what starts to happen is as your space is clear and as your body rhythms are deeply grounded, you build resilience. And from that resilience, you actually are a stronger, more embodied version of yourself. You're able to take on more. You're able to see more. So you're even what you perceive as ambition, your own ambitions, will be much greater from working the elements in sequence. And this was a thing I wasn't taught this when I was studying Ayurveda. I wasn't taught this when I was studying yoga. This all came from me teaching and coaching Ayurveda and yoga for a few decades. And what happened was I just noticed like, wow, this works. When you work the elements this way, this is indeed innovating on the teachings of Ayurveda, making them super applicable, super fast for modern humans. So like the whole idea is teaching should get better over time. Right? Like we should actually be getting smarter as a species over time in understanding the 5 elements, the ancient 5 elements that are part of every indigenous culture. You start to get able to be better at applying that in your modern life. And to me, that's what Master of You essentially is for and is about. So with fire element, you have light, and with light, you can see. So when your space is clear and your body is grounded, you can see and point the spotlight forward. And as you do, all of the sudden, you can actually notice exactly what the destination is that you want. And then what happens is issues, or as one of my coaches, Tyler Norton, who really like the teachings from him are just embedded in the fire chapter here in Master of You, really embedded in exactly like what's it going to take to make your vision into a plan and to test the plan is what he calls issue sets. So once you can clearly see your destination and you know where you want to go, whether it's a 3-year out vision, 3 years is usually a good amount of time because it's like far enough in the future for you to dream a little bigger. 1 year, you're already in a bit of a pressure tank of like, get her done. Right. I mean, like the next 12 months, there's not as much that you can do now to make that happen in 12 months compared to in 3 years. If it's big stuff, if it's like, pivoting careers, if it's pivoting where you're living, if it's pivoting everything in your life, like 3 years is going to be bigger. I'm not saying you can't do those things in 12 months. You absolutely can. But what might happen is that you might quickly find that certain things you need skills, assets, resources that will take a little bit more time. So a 3-year vision is the dream big. That's think big. Test small is like what happens when you start to have a better plan that you can test against. Now, what is a better plan? Any of you who have like set a goal and not hit it at all, Not just not hit it in the time frame that you set it for, but had a goal, like you really wanted this thing. Like, what was that? What have you really wanted? What goal have you set and not gotten there yet? Or not gotten there and maybe even written it off. Like I'm never going to be able to make that happen. Once that comes to mind, what happens is you want to actually investigate, like, where did I stop? Like, what happened in me not getting there? Did I give up? Did the going get hard? Why did the going get hard? And what happens is you can start to look at, like, exactly what were the critical issues between you and achieving this and arriving and being that next version of yourself who had done that, been there, done that. Understanding exactly what were maybe some missing skills. What were some missing resources? What have people done that actually got there that you didn't do? What knowledge did they have? What relationships did they have? What were their strengths that are maybe weaknesses in you? What opportunities were they able to latch into? And how did they generate those opportunities? That is all what arises when you start to actually look at the issues. Now, what I find is a bit endemic in our sort of new agey yoga world is the idea that it shouldn't be hard. Like, if it's hard, you're out of flow. And I really don't understand where that comes from. Like, that is not inherently in the teachings of yoga. What is the term tapas. This is a huge part of the yogic path. So, and I'm going to read again from the book. Yogis historically have held a special regard for fire element. The term tapas, or intentional friction, is regarded as key to enlightenment, to transforming the mundane into the extraordinary. Tapas is generated from the tension of taking necessary, informed actions to evolve, similar to the experience of a tough, sweat-inducing workout. Tapas transforms the fuel of what already is into what is possible next. In burning off other possibilities, you decide your best route forward. Tapas also purifies and directs your next identity by burning off what no longer serves you, generating light to reveal the way forward. Seeing right effort and aligned effort versus more effort is fire's way of self-compassion and self-realization. So with tapas comes flow. It's not the other way around. It's not the other way around. We have to be willing to see how it is in order to become what could happen next. Now, how do we do this? Like, how do we apply once we're willing, and this is a big thing, it's like, are you willing to change? Are you willing to do the work? Are you willing to do what is needed in order to attain the 3-year vision? This question, like this question, like sitting with this and asking yourself, when you set a vision, like, am I willing? Am I willing to become who I need to become in order to make this happen? That's heavy. That's not an easy question to sit with, but it's a great way to start to test whether this is the right goal for you or not. I've often seen people set goals that are way too lofty and then not pause and say, like, am I willing? Am I willing to go through the fire? Right? Am I willing to walk on the hot coals? Am I willing to, I often will use a surfing analogy. So I was out surfing with Indy a couple weeks ago, and she, I think, let me think about this. We were both on paddleboards out front, and paddleboards are very, very buoyant and much larger often than surfboards. And so in the impact zone, or like the place where you're in like the whitewash and you're trying to get to the outside of the waves in order to catch a wave. So if you've already surfed a wave and you haven't gotten to the outside, you might be in the impact zone. Sometimes when you're in the impact zone, appropriately named, what happens is there's a set. You're like in the middle of a set, and the waves are now like, there's a line of waves coming to crash on your head. Yeah, it is really as pleasant as it sounds. So there's some strategy. If you're on a surfboard, a small enough board like a shortboard, you try to duck dive under the waves. Like, that's the best strategy. If you have a piece of equipment that's less buoyant that you can actually force under the wave. And that way you can actually make some progress potentially, or at least hold your own ground and not get like swept into shore. We have a really rocky shore where we are, so that's not very pleasant either. If you have a large buoyant board, duck diving is not an option, but you can duck dive without your board, and you just have to be careful that your board doesn't hit any of the other people that may be around you. All right, so India and I are out there. There's about a 10-wave set, and we're going to take every wave more or less on the head unless we duck dive under. And I noticed while she and I were in it, and she's been in the ocean since, we've lived here in Mexico at the ocean since she was about 4, so she has some life experience with this. Not new. And yet, right? And yet it can be so hard in the moment when you're just getting tired and it's the 7th wave that you've had to duck dive under, and it's a bit of a struggle and you're not making any progress to getting the outside of the waves, and they just keep coming and you can't really tell how many more are going to come. And then it's the wave 10. And then honestly, this was actually more than a 10 wave set. It just kept coming. And I encouraged her to relax and just deal with the next wave in front of her, and then relax, and then the next wave in front of her, and relax, and the next wave in front of her. Knowing that issue sets, the issues that come between you and a goal will often come in sets, and it can be heavy at times. It can be really, really uncomfortable at times. And the yogis are very clear that tapas is not comfortable. It's not. But if you want to transform the mundane into the extraordinary, you've got to cash in some chips, and you might cash in the chips of comfort if you mean it, if you're really going to get there. And so anyways, eventually there was a little bit of a break, and I'm like, Indy, we should paddle hard that way now. We get to the outside, and then we debrief of what happened, and are we fine, and what did we learn, and how did that go? Now, there's in the new age world often this sense that things shouldn't get hard if we're aligned. And one of the things I asked Indy to consider as we were now in the zone of actually being able to catch a wave again, or decide not to take a wave and not take any waves on the head, is because anyone who's ever gotten good at surfing not had to deal with the impact zone repetitively during different times of, during different surf sessions, as they're called. And she came to the accurate conclusion that no, you don't get good at surfing without experiencing the impact zone. Now, the reason this is so important is that when we set a bigger goal, when we truly want a greater life than we currently have for ourselves, that we actually understand that tapas is part of the process of becoming. It's the chisel that chisels off the parts of us that just cannot survive at that bigger level. They just can't. They can't come along for the ride. There's new skills, there's new assets, there's new resources, there's new relationships that are absolutely necessary. And in chiseling off that which is not functional for you to get there, you have to deal with it. You're gonna have to burn, literally burn away the parts of yourself that aren't as useful for that to happen, or really just can't exist in the same potentiality. So often there are habits, for me, in my experience, some of my issue sets have really evolved around barriers in leadership and my inability to hold people accountable, really hold people accountable to what is expected of them, and my desire to coach people along the way, particularly within my company. I'm great at coaching clients, but in my teamwork, and many of you who've listened to the podcast have heard me talk about this, but until I deal with that issue set head on, I'm going to be the best manager I can possibly be, right? I'm going to be the best team leader I can possibly be. I'm going to coach people along the way into higher and higher levels of performance for themselves and for me to step into the next level of leadership. Now, that's being willing to deal with the problems head on. So once we understand that tapas is part of the way, and that it's not an indication that things are going wrong, it's an indication usually that things are going right, that the goal is great enough for you to actually look at what you need to become next. Okay, so critical issues, when we set a goal, critical issues are what are going to keep us from making it happen. What will we need to make it happen? What will we need for this vision to become real? And what could keep you from making this happen? And in this way, you're surfacing your critical issues, particularly for this vision. With a 3-year vision, you should naturally have gaps in the skills, resources, assets, and relationships needed to get there. Gaps mean you're interested in developing yourself as a human. Good thing you have plenty of time to build skills, resources, and assets, and to develop relationships. So at this phase in the Master of You journey, your job now is to gather the data that will help you map the best road to get there through assessing what you have that will help you and what you don't have that you will need, non-negotiable. So if you get the workbook, there's some exercises. Again, that's at masterofyou.us. You can get the free workbook. There's some exercises in there directly for how to identify your critical issues. And I'm going to read a little bit more. Critical issues is a term by business strategists to identify what needs to be grappled with in order to make a smart action plan. Yogis might call them critical karmas to highlight insight between cause and effect. Karma means cause and effect. Critical issues surface mostly due to competing interests, limited resources, unknowns with opportunities, and threats that are bigger than they appear. Critical issues surface by answering the question, what could go wrong? What obstacles must you overcome? Strategy is formed through a thorough processing of critical issues. These processes of structured thinking focus attention like a laser into a deliberate future. Profound insights and spiritual breakthroughs are part of solid strategic planning. Critical issues require narrowing all the potential problems and opportunities into what must get attention for the vision to be possible. Critical issues chisel the 3-year vision problem into a question. What are my essential strategies to make this dream happen? How should I get from A to B? Razor sharp, fiery attention, rather than Pollyannish thinking, is needed to find the route through the challenging terrain ahead. There's a question stem that really helps identify critical issues. Like once you've taken time to actually look at like what could go wrong and what obstacles do you have to overcome, doing this with eyes wide open is essential. And then the question of like, how might I overcome that? How do I do this and that at the same time or in the same phase? These are questions that naturally arise. So the part of when I coach people through this process time and again, like year over year over year, and often people come into Awake Living, the course that we use the Master of You curriculum. What we find is that this is the hardest part. Like fire is the hardest part, and which corresponds with yoga. Like in yoga, we say that fire's it's what does the work. It's the hardest element, right? There's nothing soft about fire. It's sharp. Is most people aren't willing to do the heavy thinking that is required in identifying exactly what the critical issues are between the vision that you want to have and what actually needs to get done in order to get there. So 2,500 years ago, Lao Tzu wrote, "The slow overcomes the fast." In the same vein, Abraham Lincoln, he always advised, right, investing time and sharpening your axe before you chop the tree will save you time in the long run. And this is how it is with fire element, is there's a process of thinking. And in the chapter of the book, I really outline the exercises step by step of like what you need to do in order to think at the level of reality in line with the level of potentiality and bring these two to terms. And when you do that, you actually emerge with a strategy, your best strategy that can work. And this is huge. And it's often really hard. So you might feel like there's smoke coming out of your ears. But at the end, what happens as you become a master of fire is you become not only a visionary for your own life, but you become capable of digesting your critical issues into success strategies. Once you can do that, you can repeatedly expand beyond who you have already been. You can author your life at an entirely larger level. And for many people saying like, I want to step into a bigger Dharma, or I really want to make this pivot, this is essential. All right, so that's my little quick overview of Master, of Fire, of Dharma, and how to achieve goals in life. It's all about critical issues, basically uncovering them and then developing critical strategies from there. And that brings us to what's coming next in this series on Dharma is time. And in the next episode, I'm going to go into Dharma and time management, which is really activity management, right? Like how do you align your time to hit your goals, to achieve your ambitions? So that's what we'll talk about next. Again, you can find Master of You at masterofyou.us. Namaste and have a great day.